radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Well, good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. Pretty much. How you doing? Today's Tuesday, June 25th, 2019. 175 days into the new year, just 190 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south. Far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the planet. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? It's going to be a great show tonight. Yeah, man. Tonight, our guest is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. Now, we're going to be doing everything tonight. Of course, we're going to talk about Deet, but we're going to be covering science, space travel, extraterrestrial contact here on Earth. We're going to talk about disclosure. We're going to talk about Disclosure Fest because she was there, and I got to meet her. So we're going to talk about that, too, as well. And what is currently being exposed to the world right now through the mainstream media, social media, television networks, all of that. So that's our show tonight. I'm very excited about this. And Deet, just a little background. If you missed a few shows where Deet called in and we talked, and they were great phone calls, great conversations. So some of you remember those phone calls and know about Deet. The rest of you may not. And so we're going to break this up into sections tonight, and we're going to find out who Deet is. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Deet. Deet, how are you?
I'm doing good. How's it going, Jimmy?
It's going fantastically well. Welcome to the program. Now, let's get one thing out of the way, which is the first-time guest disclaimer. Deet, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. There you go. You ready? Are you all set?
I'm all set.
Let's talk about you. You ready?
Already?
Yes. Let's talk about you. Let's go straight to it. Actually, I kind of want to get a foothold here. You called into the show a few times, and all of those conversations were great. And I wasn't really prepared for those because they were almost a little bit too much for me because I'm not a smart guy, right? I'm not a smart guy. And and it was like, wow. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. And for those that have not met or heard from you before, Deet is your acronym for Down to Earth Extraterrestrial. Oh. What does that mean?
Well, I would say what it means is that I'm like a really chill person. When I made my Twitter, I was like, you know what? I want to show people that I'm an alien, and I want to show them that I'm really chill and that I'm going to answer any questions they have. Because, like, you know, you could go on Twitter and just make up anything and be like, oh, yeah, I'm an alien. But, like, if you really want people to ask the right questions and to try to discover what's going on and, you know, what they should be looking at, you want to be supportive. And you don't just want to be this persona. You want to be, like, three-dimensional, you know, like someone that people can recognize, someone that people can understand, even if you're coming from a very different experience. Because I know a lot of people are going to be like, you know, like, who is this person? You know, this strange person is like, oh, yeah, you know, I reincarnated and I used to be the sailor on another planet, and now I'm a hybrid on this one.
Right.
You know, you're going to lose a lot of people that way. At least that's been my experience.
Well, and so when people see your Twitter handle, and then they go and they click, and there's a little description there, and that's what they have, they are thinking one thing. It may actually be another. In that, is this you know, a little alien gray? That it, you know what I mean? Because it's just somebody posting on Twitter. They've never met you. They've never seen you.
Yeah.
So is that what they are thinking? You know, when they first start asking you, you know, and then how do you explain to them who you are?
Oh yeah, like before I posted up my video where I'm just talking in it, like a lot of people were just like, "Are you living on a base somewhere? Like, what color is your skin? Do you have big eyes? Can we see pictures?" And, you know, a lot of people come like that. They're just like, how are you going to prove that you're an alien? Are you, like, telepathic or something? And what I usually do is I walk people through and be like, I came here out of goodwill, and I'm going to answer any questions you have. And I live mostly like a human being, just like you do on this planet. Like, I'm a little bit more psychic, but, you know, I could sort of show anyone how to do that if they give me enough time. And I just go from there because, you know, people will either walk out at that point, or if they stick around for the explanation, they usually start to warm up to me. They're like, you know what? I've never had this conversation before. Anything like this conversation. I think you're the real deal. And I'm like, great, now we can get somewhere.
When you explain to them that you're not a little gray, right, or a mantis or whatever, you know, their expectations are. I like that, you know, what color's your skin? I'm sure that you've answered that question many times. But you were, you describe yourself as an alien hybrid. Does that mean that your parents are hybrids as well, or did the genealogy start with you?
Oh, it started with me. Like, it's hard. In a way, it's kind of hard to explain because it's like, I don't think anyone really signs up to be like, you know what, we're going to get married, you know, we're going to have like alien hybrid kids, and we're just going to settle down in the countryside and raise them up to change the world. I don't know if anyone like plans that normally in their life. I'm pretty sure it was a surprise for my parents. Yeah, my mom's always told me that, actually. She was like, you were the unexpected one.
So, okay, so let's talk through that for a second. How were you conceived?
Well, my mom gave birth to me, you know, as normal babies are born, but before I was born, the Grays told me that they took me out, changed some things in my genetics, and then put me back in.
And does your mom have any memory of this?
I've asked her a lot about it, but she doesn't really like talking about it.
And well, what's her? I can imagine that. But
there's so many details about it too, because there's been times right before we're visited, where she'll like open up about it, where she'll be like, yeah, they're coming. Yes, we're being visited by aliens, but asking her in broad daylight, it's like, hey, Mom, remember when they were hanging out last night? And she'll be like, what are you talking about? Everyone was asleep, and I'm just like,
Well, and what what state were you living, or your parents?
My parents. Well, we've lived in Utah, California.
No, I mean when you were born, when this contact was happening.
Oh, well, I was living in Italy.
You were living in Italy when this went down.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So then, how long did you guys live in Italy?
It's this crazy story because, like, right after I was born, like a month later, my parents moved here to the United States.
And where'd they move to?
Let's see if I'm remembering correctly. I believe it was New York.
Went to New York first, and then where were you raised? Where did you live the longest?
I would say probably here in California. Yeah, definitely here.
Yeah, here. Okay, Southern California.
Yeah.
Now, growing up, were you in contact?
Oh yeah, it's been a consistent theme in my life. I remember there was one person I was telling, and they were like, well, how far back do you remember being taken up into the ships? And I was like, I remember as far back as being carried up into the ships before I could walk.
So okay, and when all of this is happening, was this something that was first off physical? Were you awake, and do you remember all of this?
Oh yeah. There's a couple of experiences that have been like sort of messy in my head, but I'm sure that's because there's things that I haven't come to terms with that happened. But I have other experiences that are crystal clear, where like remember like hearing this message telepathically in my head. It's like, wake up, we're coming. And then I wake up all of a sudden and I'm all groggy, and I look out the window and I start seeing a light, and it's slowly coming down from the sky, and as it gets closer it darkens. And then it gets closer and closer until it's this ship. And then I hear this telepathic message that's like, go outside. And as I walk outside, and usually my family comes too, where everyone's outside, and then the ship sort of stops, like less than a foot over the ground, and suddenly this opening appears on the side of the ship, and gray beings come out. And they're really tall and really psychically gifted. Like, these guys could lift a truck if they wanted to, just by looking at it. And then they're like, okay, everyone on the ship. And so we all walk in, and then the ship closes again, and it starts lifting up. And sometimes they make some parts of the wall clear so we can see as the ship is moving, but most of the time they don't. And when I am watching, I just see the city get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then we go above the clouds, and then we get farther and farther and farther away from the clouds until this big ship just, you sort of see it like coming in out of the distance. Although it's not moving, we're just moving towards it. And this all happens so fast because these ships move so fast and so quietly. Like, the only times I've ever like experienced what you could call like air turbulence on those ships was twice, because usually they have this incredibly perfect way of just navigating through the air. And so the ship gets, well, the big ship from far away gets closer and closer until we reach it. And then this ship has like doors that move. So we see these doors open slowly, and then light pours in from the docking area. And our little ship goes in, the doors close, and our little ship opens, and we all walk out. And usually there's some grays waiting there too. And this other ship that's huge, it's this big pearly white on the outside, and it's got this translucence to the outside of it. It shines even though it's not like super polished or anything. And on the inside, like the hangars are huge. I think I've described them once. They're sort of like the size of a school gym, but more rounded. They always have this rounded, sort of natural-looking shape. And then, smaller doors on the end where you go into the hallways. And other than the hangars, the ship is usually pretty dark, because the Greys, they like it dark. There's usually dim light. And then there's been a few times where I've seen, military people on the ship. And every time I see them, the Greys, they'll tell me, be like, don't get too comfortable around them. Don't be nice to them. And I'm just like, why? They're just human beings. And the Greys are always like, let us deal with them. And then there's sometimes where I see human psychics too, usually around these military people. The military psychics are always kind of put off because the Greys, when they show up and they introduce themselves, they're like, hello, yes, this is our hybrid. She's going to watch. And I'm just like, okay. And I don't usually speak in front of humans when I see them like that. I'm usually just telepathic.
How many hybrids are on this planet that are like yourself?
Like myself? Well, from what the Greys have told me, let's see. Well, the Greys they kind of explain it in a vague way because they say that, oh yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of kids that are hybrids now. And I'm like, well, how many are like me, that pretend that they're not hybrids so they can go and live with human beings? Right. And the Greys are always like, there's a sizable number. There's many like you, but we keep you separate from each other. And what they mean by that is that they tell us to never live close to each other on the surface.
Well, how would you know? Well, how would you know if there was a hybrid living near you if you're not in contact with them? How does that happen?
Well, I don't know about hybrids that are part human and part something else. But if there was another hybrid that was related to the same aliens as me, I would be able to tell.
You'd be able to tell.
I would sense that.
Have you met another hybrid like yourself?
Oh yeah, I've met tons on the ship in person, here on the surface of the planet. Mm-hmm. That's only happened once, as far as I can remember.
Did you guys talk?
Oh yeah, we talked, but at the time, neither me or them, neither of us consciously remembered that we were hybrids at night, because we met during the day, oh yeah, we moved in recently. Oh, hi there. Yeah, and that was before I breached into the memories that the Greys were trying to make me forget.
And we're gonna get into that in just a bit. I find that very interesting. But on the other side, staying on this. When you met the other hybrid, did you guys compare notes? That should be the first thing that I would do. You have to confirm, right, that they are who they are or who you think they are. Yeah. Did you guys compare notes? What did you talk about?
Well, it was funny because, as soon as we met them, before I remembered anything, as soon as I met them, I was like, wow, there's something different about these people. I was like, I don't know, I feel so comfortable around them. And then, I was a kid at the time, so I went and spoke with the other kids, and the adults walked off. And, wouldn't you know, the first thing we started talking about was aliens. And they were like, oh, yeah, we heard there's, some cave paintings that are depicting UFOs. Aliens have definitely been around for a long time. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know about that. I didn't know you guys were so open to the idea of aliens. I was like, that's so cool. And they're like, you're so cool. Kid stuff. But it was that, the thing is that we both didn't really realize that the reason we were so open to that and the reason we were hitting it off so well is because we were both groups of hybrids and we were just interacting without even thinking about it because we had all forgotten. There's been times where the Greys have come, be like, oh yeah, you're going to get a checkup now. And I won't remember. I wouldn't have remembered all the other memories I spent with them. And I start freaking out in the middle of the night, oh my God, what's going on? Why am I hearing this voice? And the Greys are like, stop freaking out and remember. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then they show up and they usually psychically grab me to stop me from moving. And then they look me in the eye and they're like, now you're going to remember that you know who we are. And I'm just like, no. And I remember these times that I freaked out really bad because I was like, why are these aliens showing up in the middle of the night? And then suddenly I remember and I'm like, oh yeah. Oh my God, I know you. And they're like, why didn't you remember sooner? You were like freaking out. And I was like, I don't know. And it's like, it's because it's messy. Like, personally, I don't like that they make us all forget, because it's like, it's going to cause problems. I mean, we can meet each other and not even know, but at the same time, it's like, is that really the best way to go about it? If you're going to make, like, all these hybrids on this planet because you want to figure out how to be human, or you want to, like, insert into human life, I don't think it's a good idea for them to not even know what they're doing.
How old are you?
Like right now or at the time?
Right now.
20.
You're 20. And as everybody is listening to you right now, you sound much older, right? When I was 20, I was not talking like this, and you can trust me on that. I barely...
Oh.
Okay, so anyway, I don't want to crack any funny jokes here, but when I was 20, I wasn't you. But the other side of this is that there are those that are going to be listening to this right now and say that Deet is there, that this may be imagined, that this is something that is made up, and I know that you deal with that a lot. What is your response? Yeah. What is your response to that?
Let's see. Well, when people tell me it's imagined, the first thing that I usually say to them is that I'm like, okay, so are all the UFO cases that are recorded every year across the world, the eyewitness testimonies that didn't fly like an airplane, are those imagined too? Are you going to sit here and tell me that, like, those thousands of cases every year from all across the world, they're just imagined and people just do that because they feel like it? There's no correlation at all?
That's a pretty good answer. It's a pretty good answer. Have you gone to any regression therapist or anybody that does that kind of research in the UFO community to search for your memories?
What I have done is that around when I was in late middle school, all the memories of my past life just sort of, like, out of nowhere just came rushing into my head, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? What the only thing I've done about that is that, like, I'd say around 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? I really want to delve into these past life memories, because some of them are crystal clear, but some of them are, like, muddy. So I took this, like, YouTube video that was, like, free past life regression, and it was just, recording of a guy being like, now you're getting very sleepy, and walking me through it. And I took that, and I did start remembering stuff. That one was pretty useful, but other than that, I haven't really gone to any regressions or anything.
Well, I asked that, but I know that I've talked to you about this before, but do you remember your past life on the planet where you are from?
Oh, yeah. I remember it pretty vividly. Yeah, that planet is called Osetutus, and that planet is much smaller than Earth. Really cute, though, and it orbits this really nice-looking blue little star. And, oh, man, I miss that place sometimes. It's really different from Earth, I'll tell you that. We just have a completely different structured society over there. We look human-like over there. Like, we don't have gray skin. We have hair. We have, like, monkey-shaped ears. But we run our society differently, and because of that, we function a lot more efficiently. We have space-traversing technology. We have some forms of artificial intelligence. We don't have, like, poverty in the street or regularly statistics of people committing crimes. Like, that's kind of unheard of over there. One of the things that's most surprising, like, coming from over there is just to see Earth is like, wow, oh my God, like, so many people are violent over here. Like, that's not normal. And
when you bring up homelessness and you just brought up crime, and you live here in Southern California, and right now in Los Angeles, the homeless situation and what is and what comes along with that is out of control. Is ET aware of this? Are your handlers aware of this? And how does it make you feel?
Well, yeah, the Greys, they have a rough idea of the situation over here in Los Angeles. They don't really care to have too much of a complete idea because they don't understand the way humans think too much. They really do try, but some things are just lost on them.
Like what? What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I mean that, like, let's say that, like, I'm eating this ice cream cone, right? And, like, I'm loving this flavor. I'm just having a ball with it. I'm like, this is the best ice cream I've ever had. And then someone bumps into me and I drop it, and I get so crestfallen. You know, my day is ruined now. Like, if a Gray was watching that, he would just sort of look at me and be like, what's wrong? Like, they have some emotions, but there's also complex emotions that they just don't feel. They can feel things with empathy, but they don't feel it for themselves. There's many, many times where I've heard them complaining about humans that they bring into the ship because they just start freaking out. They're just like, we told them to calm down. Why wouldn't they calm down? I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, really? You just abduct someone off the street? You think they're going to be okay about it? It's like, we told them we're not going to hurt them. It's like, that's not how humans work.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that humans find them to be generally terrifying. From what I've heard from them and from humans I've met on the ship, like, they're really tall, and them being so lanky and skinny makes them look a little bit disturbing from a human's perspective, especially with how large their head is.
Well, let's. I've got 2 minutes before the break. You've mentioned the Greys a few times, but you are not a Gray. You described, your, what's the word I want to use? Your species, your race back on your planet as being very much like us. Well, then who are the Greys and where are they from?
So the Greys, they've told me a couple times, and I've asked them a couple times, and they tell me that they come from this star in the Orion constellation called Rigel B, and they come from a planet called Andar. And what they told me about their history is that over on that planet, way over there, they were like these designer babies, basically. So there was a civilization there that was like, you know what, we want to make like perfect life forms. We want to make them super psychically powerful and intelligent and just capable of doing anything and logical. And so that was the ancestors of the Greys that I know now. And what happened is that that planet pretty much got stuck in a civil war, like a planetary civil war, between sort of like Zeta-like beings that were there and then reptilian-like beings that were there. And apparently the reptilians were like really winning pretty bad. And unfortunately, the methods they were using to fight were slowly destroying the planet from like a fauna/flora perspective. Like, they were just pretty much destroying it over this petty civil war. So what the ancestors of the Greys decided to do is they're like, well, you know what? Pretty much this conflict isn't ours, because even though, we're related to this other species here, we're not them. We're just straight up not them. And they don't treat us like them. So they took some of the ships that were there, because they were able to space travel at that point. And they took a few of the of that other race that's kind of like Zetas, and they were like, you're going to come with us, and we're just going to leave. We're just going to straight up leave the planet. And their whole idea was that they could make this self-sustaining space colony, just like a huge mega cluster of ships to live in. And they did that for a while. But before they left the planet, they ended up getting exposed to basically a lot of radiation from the infighting. And so what happened is that they were living in this colony for, it looks like something like 200 years, and their DNA just started decaying. And they were able to fix it. The Greys have some pretty amazing ways of doing gene therapy. But at the same time, the method that they use to alter their DNA starts to make their DNA very susceptible to breaking under stress the longer that they do it for. So in between all that, the Greys were trying to look for some new planet to call home. And they tried twice. Once it was an actual planet, which they got chased off of by, they tell me it was that group that works for the Pleiadians, but not just the Pleiadians.
Well, let's
they
take
were chased off.
Deet, I need to take a break right here, so let's do that. I can't be late. So let's take a break right here. We'll pick up right where we are leaving off. Our guest tonight is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. Tomorrow night, David Icke. David Icke right here on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Deet at Down2ET on Twitter. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. Tomorrow night, David Icke. David Icke right here on Fade to Black. Now, getting back to the conversation where we left off, Deet, you said that the Greys went through an intense amount of radiation and left their planet. So I assume... At this point, well, I'm going to let you finish, but were they living on just ships?
Oh, yeah. There's some ships that they still have from when they originally left, but they made a lot more since then.
Right. And what about here on Earth? There's the Wilson, the Davis Wilson document leak from a couple of weeks ago, which stated that alien abductions are not real. Can you address that? Are the Greys abducting humans?
Yeah. I haven't seen all the ones that they do while I'm on the ship, but there's been times where it's like in the next room over, they just bring someone and the person's freaking out. I have heard people say that maybe the implication of that document is that maybe the abductions don't take place in a physical way. And honestly, I don't know about that. There have been some abductions that clearly sound like someone's been taken sort of out of this dimension or maybe out of their body onto a ship. And I can understand why it would be hard for someone to be able to tell if that's the case or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because humans don't really perceive spirits. So for them, being like suddenly a spirit would be very disorienting. There's a lot of alien species that can see spirits and perceive them like just as you would see a bird like off in the distance or like some bugs in the grass. It's not that, that it's not like ghosts are seen differently to ETs. ETs know when a spirit is alive or dead. They can tell, oh, you have a living body somewhere. Oh, you're dead right now. But for them, there is a kind of different mentality around it, because for them, when you die, it's not the end of you. Like reincarnation is a pretty popular idea in many places in the universe because, they see that. They see the result of, spirits leaving the body and then going to do something else, reincarnating or not. It's mostly around here that there's a misconception about it.
You mentioned you and your family going aboard a ship, and this has happened many times, and you went up. What were the purposes of those visits and you guys going up to, well, the mothership, we'll call it?
Mm-hmm. Well, most of the time, the visits are for, like, checkups. They check up on me, they check up on my siblings, they check up on my parents. And that's usually what it is. It usually doesn't take more than like an hour and 30 minutes. They're just like, well, we want to make sure that you're not sick. We want to see what your baseline is. We want to see, like the inside climate of your body. How's it doing? And there's other times where it's not just a checkup. Like there was one time when I was much younger where they were there for a checkup and they asked me, they were like, would you give some of your bone marrow to another hybrid? And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, this other hybrid, their bone marrow isn't really like multiplying properly. It's basically got an issue. And they're like, and if you give this hybrid some of your bone marrow, that'll be fine. And I was like a little kid. I didn't really understand what they meant. So I was like, if it helps, sure. And they're like, it's going to be kind of painful. And I was like, oh, as long as it helps, it's fine. And then, the actual night comes where they're like, oh, okay, we're going to take you up and we're going to operate on you. And I was like freaking out. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. This is a bad idea. And at that point, they just sort of picked me up telepathically and then just walk onto the ship with me floating behind them. And after that, they were like, it's going to be okay. We're going to do the operation. My parents were there, although they weren't in the operating room. And they took me in. They had me lay down on this like completely flat sort of metal table. And they were like, okay. And they're like, we're going to hold you in place as we do this. And I don't really remember why they didn't use something like an anesthetic. I remember there was like some kind of specific reason, but they were like, we're just going to operate on you. And I was like, oh, okay. And they have this way of inducing certain hypnotic-like states when they want you to be more suggestive or open to what they want to do. And so they kind of look at you and they induce a state of like really relaxation. So that's what they did to me. They looked me dead in the eye as I was laying on the table, and they were like, and now you're going to relax. And so I was there, and I couldn't move on the table. And then they basically cut into my femur. Yeah, that's the biggest one. They cut into one of my femurs and started extracting bone marrow, and it was so painful. Like if I could have been screaming or moving, like I would have been thrashing all over the place. But I couldn't move, and so I was just sort of there, like in agony, unable to move or say anything, just looking at them as they were doing their thing. And I guess it was like something like 20 or 30 minutes later, they're like, okay, we have enough. And then they closed up the wound. It wasn't like a complete close. They have a way of making the skin seal, like sort of non-permanently, and then they usually come back and they use a different. It's kind of like a machine that they use that sort of induces the cells to replicate into something that looks like it was never cut. They do that a lot. So they take out the marrow. They're like, okay, it's over. Suddenly I can move again. I'm like drained, totally exhausted. I just don't want to do anything. So one of them picks me up and they're like, you did really good. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, man. And so they take me to this other room where they have me rest for a little while. And they have these specific rooms that sort of like, they have these specific rooms that they use that are filled with a specific, like, resonating frequency. And these rooms basically induce certain processes in the body. Because what they told me specifically about bodies and cells is that a lot of what cells use to communicate is frequency. So if you put someone in a room filled with a certain frequency, their cells, if it's a frequency that their cells use to communicate, they'll think it's a message and start acting in that way. So the room that they put me in, the frequency of that room was basically telling my cells to replicate. So they put me in that room to like gain some of the bone marrow I lost and to help the cells around the cut start to grow back. So I was in there for the rest of the time they had me up there, which felt like roughly 30 to 40 minutes. And then they use the other machine, which makes the skin look like it hasn't been cut as much. And then they took me down with my parents and my siblings, and that was it. And I remember.
Well, what does? I'm sure you visited doctors. What is your blood when they run blood or check on you? Do they know what's going on, with your blood type or your DNA?
That's the most surprising part. They never say anything. They're just like, oh, we're going to do a blood test now. Okay. And they come back and they don't notice anything. And, I've been wanting to have like a DNA test done, like a really specific, thorough DNA test, because I'm sure that there's some small aspect that must be an indicator. I'm sure of it. But, I'm guessing it's the fact that I am a hybrid that sort of makes it harder to tell, because I've seen other hybrids that very clearly look alien. It's like they've got like almost no hair. Their skin is pale to the point where you can see their veins. They've got this completely different bone structure going on. I've seen that. But in my particular case, I'm not hybrid enough that most people would notice. And most people wouldn't notice from a blood test either.
How, when they come and visit you, do you have some type of tracking device? How do they know where you are at?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, everyone in my family, including me, we have, like, I wouldn't say a handful. It's usually 2 or 3. What do we call them down here? I'm trying to remember what we use for them. I guess we'll use the word tracking device. So we have, like, implants. So I'm pretty sure that I have 3 implants. And what the Greys do specifically is that they put in one implant that sort of emits your biological state. So they use that one for picking up, from what they've told me, it picks up some aspects of the blood pH, the sort of toxicity level in the blood, and then the resting temperature. And then the other one that they put in, that one is for location. So when they put it in, they connect it to some nerve endings. They usually grow some of your nerves a little bit. Like, they'll open up the skin. They'll point this device at that spot while holding onto one of your nerves, and the nerve will start growing like crazy. And what they'll do is they'll put in this really specific, tiny stone-looking thing in there, and the nerves will just grow all around it and basically encapsulate it. And when that happens, this electric current, well, as much of a current as you can get in the human body, a really small electrical impulse starts running through this thing. And it basically starts emitting this specific frequency at all times that basically gives away your location if you're looking at it in the right band. You were at Disclosure Fest
this weekend on Saturday, and first off, let's actually start there. Being in a public place, what is that like? Being around, thousands of people for you? Are you okay with that?
That's a good question to ask, because from what I've been able to tell about Greys and hybrids of Greys is that we tend to be sensitive. Like, it seems like we pick up on a lot more stimulus, and therefore we're more sensitive to stimulus. For me, I can be around a lot of people if it's not too loud. But if it's, like, super loud and everyone is talking and everyone is super excited, it starts to get draining on me. I really hate sort of using my telepathy because, I don't know, I've had bad experiences with it. But when I'm around a lot of people and people are really excited, I start to pick up sort of on the residue of their thoughts, and it can be really distracting.
But
other than that,
there were a few sightings there. I witnessed one that I can't explain. I did see some other stuff that clearly were just groups of party balloons and whatever that were being released.
I saw a balloon that day.
Yeah, I saw those. But there was one that was appeared to me when it was pointed out to me, and I couldn't believe how many people were standing there watching it. It was in the hundreds. It appeared to be a planet. That's what, if I would have looked up in the sky and saw this on my own, I was by myself, I'd go, okay, that's Venus, no big deal. I'd look away and whatever. But it was up in the blue sky, motionless, and then it went into a straight line. I don't want to waste time on this. And then it dashed away, and that was pretty trippy for me to see. Was that an ET craft? Did you happen to look up at any of these objects that people were seeing?
I did see one. I'm not sure if it's the same one as you, but the one that I saw, everyone was looking at it. Like, people were starting to form a crowd just as people looking up and noticing it. And that one was super far up in the air and blinking. And the one that I saw that day, I got super curious about it because I was there. And someone I was with was like, yeah, that doesn't really look like a UFO. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to check. So I went up in remote view and I started going up towards this blinking light. And when I got there, it was like this completely spherical craft that was just blinking on and off. And I was like, okay, well, let's see who's inside. So I go inside of this craft and just pass through one of the walls. And it's not too big. It's about the size of like a small car, just slightly less long. And there's these 3 short beings in there. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're showing off. You know, it's like, there's all these humans here. Why not? And I'm like, can't you guys get a little lower? Barely anyone can see you. And they're like, we can't, because we can't. That would be breaking the rules. We can only come in our allotted time around here, and we can't get too low. And as I'm looking at them, I realize that there's this other ship that's like basically going in circles around the one that I'm in. And it's the same kind of ship, it's the same size, and it also has 3 pilots. They're basically doing maneuvers for anyone that can see it that far away. So I come back down, and I turn to the person next to me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that one's definitely an alien ship, because I just went in there, and they were aliens. And I kind of wish more people could remote view, because I see that there's a lot of confusion about whether or not something in the sky is a ship or not. But at the same time, it seems like, at least here on Earth, there's kind of a taboo about talking about psychic sensitivities and psychic experiences. And to me, that sort of seems illogical, because like, on the planet that I spent my past life in, we celebrated that. Like, oh, you have an ability, like, why don't you go to school and hone it? Because that would be totally useful for society. Honestly, like, I wish we did that here on Earth. I wish there were more classes and more courses and more different teachings of teaching humans how to use psychic abilities. Psychic abilities are extremely convenient and extremely useful. Like, you know, not even just remote view. You know, if you have telekinesis, like, you can lift things. You can treat things like they don't have a weight and move them around. If you have, like, I believe it's called psychometry, you can see the history of an object. You just pick it up and you see its entire lifetime of memories. You know, and something like telepathy, like, I feel like that one's a no-brainer, because it's like, you never have a misunderstanding with anyone ever again. Like, that's pretty convenient.
Now, what do we do about, I feel like I just cut you off, and if I did, I apologize for that. There are so many on this planet that are expecting and wanting ET to come down and save us from ourselves. You know, why hasn't that happened?
Well, I can tell you from what I've seen and what I've heard. So, and there's two aspects of this, because I've asked my Greys several times before. I'm like, why don't you do something for humanity? Why don't you give us some of this technology? Like, humans would benefit so much from that. And the answer that I usually get from them is that it wouldn't be convenient for us if we did that. I'm just like, wow.
Convenient?
Like, there's been times where I've been seriously pissed at them over that. I'd be like, I literally saw someone starving in the street today, and you're up here flying around your freaking magic spacecraft doing whatever you want. Although they don't even get that, because they don't really understand irritation too much. You know, but I've also spoken to different beings in remote view, because I tend to go up to the pretty much the very top of the gas layer on Earth just to hang out, because it's a really chill place to be, honestly. And, you know, I've been going up there recently, and there's all these ships up there. It's like crowded now. I've been going inside and asking, like, what's the big deal? Why is everyone here? And so basically, the beings I've met up there, they all go under this galactic federation, or at least most of them, because some of the ones I've met, they're like, we're just here to document things. We don't actually care about humanity. I'm like, wow, okay. But the ones that are in this federation that I met, they're like, okay, so right now, humanity's in a state where they don't seem to really want aliens, and they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. And I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do about that? And they're like, well, what we want to do is we want to teach humans to help themselves. And I've heard this concern a lot, and I understand this concern. It's that if aliens just come down from the sky and give humans everything they need, humans might just start worshiping aliens. If aliens just came down and were like, you know what, here, no more poverty, here, no more hunger, no more thirst, no more struggling, and then they just came down and lived with us, like, we wouldn't treat them the same way that we treat a human being. Like, it just wouldn't be. Like, some would obviously be angry and some afraid, but for the most part...
Oh, we lost you.
Oh,
are you there? You said for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part, like, humanity would treat these beings as these almost angelic, sort of amazing creatures that come down from the sky that can't be understood. And, you know, there's humanoid species in space, like ones that look extremely human-like. But even then, like, the main concern that many of these races have is that if they just help humanity too much, humanity won't want to do their own thing. Because, like, I've gone up and I've asked them, I'm like, why can't you just change the government? Why can't you just tell them, like, change your government or stop, you know, the systems we have here so humans can build their own? And they're like, if we stop the way that humans govern themselves, they're not going to want to make a new way because they're just going to want us to govern them. That's what they've told me. And they've showed me examples. They've showed me these images and these memories of times where they went to planets that had, like, sort of this process of contact like Earth is having now. And there's been times if they try to rush it, if they get impatient, or if they just try to sort of push that race into doing what they want, that they get really negative results. Because it's basically like the sovereignty of a planet we're talking about here. Like, I know that most people don't see it from this perspective, but basically Earth, like the area around Earth and the resources of Earth, they're yours first. If anyone wants to come to Earth and take something, basically it's your choice if they're allowed to or not. And, you know, there's beings here that really don't care about that, like migrates. They just show up, do whatever they want, and then fly off. And the only reason that they get away with that is because this Federation has rules. And one of the rules is that, like, no race can occupy your planet if you don't give them explicit permission. But there's been people in the past, from what I've heard in some of humanity's military and some of humanity's higher seats or whatever, that gave my graves explicit permission. And the graves can prove this to the Federation. They can basically be like, yeah, you know what, we have permission. So you can't use your force to get us out of here because there's a lot of people in this Federation, way more than the Greys. And in fact, humanity outnumbers the Greys. Even with all hybrids, like, the Greys are a really small population compared to human beings. So we've got this whole situation right now where we have aliens that, for whatever reason, humanity, at least to some extent, has allowed the exploitation of Earth for. And then we have these other beings that want Earth to sort of get a sovereignty. They want humans to, like, realize their potential and where they stand in the universe. But they can't really force that, because if they do, it won't be there. It's got to be like this really gentle sort of like pushing in the right direction, even with the ETs here that are making messes. And
well, you mentioned, yeah, we've got 90 seconds before the break. You mentioned that there were military, Earth military, I should say, on board these craft, that you saw them. What was that interaction for? What was the military doing there? We've got about 1 minute.
Oh, well, they usually bring them up to make deals. Whenever they're there, it's because they're renegotiating something or they're handing something over. So,
like what? I mean, what are you suggesting here?
Well, sometimes, oh man, the military's asked for hybrids a lot, actually, from the Greys. And the Greys usually say no. They usually say no every time. But what they say instead is, here, you can have this technology, or we'll give you this star map, or you can have this blueprint. And what they usually get in exchange is like rights to a plot of land, or rights to abduct people in a certain area, or let's see, what's one other thing they get? Or sometimes rights to human beings. They'll be like, oh, you know what, we want like this, we want a certain number of human beings that you just hand over to us and we do whatever we want. And the military will be like, well, what am I getting in exchange? And then, you know, the humans I see on this ship, they're usually in the middle of negotiating or facilitating that. Although I haven't seen human trafficking up close, because I know I would be pissed. For the Greys, they never show me that aspect.
Very interesting. We need to take a break right here. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. Tomorrow night, David Icke, right here on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I know you want to follow Deet, and Deet is down to ET on Twitter. We've got the links up right there. And now, okay, Deet, I can see that we're going to run out of time tonight. We're going to head straight to overtime. I can see it coming. A couple of things really quick. Let's push the conversation in this direction. Disclosure is the conversation right now. We've got the Pentagon apparently involved. We've got the Navy involved. President Trump talked about UFOs last weekend. The mainstream media, New York Times, CNN, Fox, everybody's covering UFOs and Navy pilots. What's going on?
Well, from my perspective on the subject, what I see is a lot of people who know something who are finally starting to talk about it. And at the same time, I feel like I'm one of those people. Because, like, I don't know, like, I was a kid for most of the life I've lived here, so I don't really know how much I could have contributed to the effort until now. But at the same time, I feel like it's completely necessary that I come out and talk about my experiences right now, because I know there's other hybrids out there, and I know there's other people who know about the hybrids, or they know about the grays, or they know some aspect of the situation that relates to what I'm talking about. My personal take on this is that, at the very least, if I can come out and show people that part of this is a reality, part of this is true, that this aspect also exists, that maybe others who come from my same experiences, or at least some of the information that I'm talking about, will come forward as well with this. Because the way that I see it right now, we can't wait for the government to disclose on their own. But from what I've seen, that hasn't really worked for the last 60 years. I mean, we can't really predict exactly how a government will react to certain specific events. But my idea about it is that if we want disclosure, and we want it to happen like a real disclosure, like the real files, the real blueprints, the real crash retrievals, then we've got to be coming out with whatever we've got. Because from my perspective, if we start our own disclosure first, the government's going to play catch up. But if we're constantly waiting for the government to start, I don't think they're going to start. It doesn't seem like they're going to start, and to me, it doesn't look like they've shown any signs that they want to start. I mean, if you look at all the stuff that's been created just in movies and televisions and shows, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that sort of implies that the idea of ETs could be real, or, oh, how amazing that would be. But at the same time, the climate has been sort of skepticism. It's been, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, like only an idiot would believe that. Scientists don't even talk about that kind of thing. So my whole take on it is that we've got to band together, as a community, and we've got to bring forward what we have, anything that we have.
Well, the Navy, and specifically the Navy and the Pentagon is saying, well, we don't know actually what's going on. We need to investigate this. But you have seen military officials on these craft, so clearly they know what is going on, right? I mean, there isn't any question about that, is there?
Not for me. My only question is, how far does the secrecy go? Because I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to walk onto a base and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, it's a hybrid we saw on the ship. Like, obviously, it's not a lot of military that's involved in this, although I do think that in some way they have some kind of substantial pull. But at the same time, there's clearly, an element in, at least I can say for here in the United States, because I've lived here, there's an element within our human society here that knows about it and interacts with these beings. We just need to figure out where it goes and why.
The disclosure that is happening now, you just mentioned, when I'm talking about the mainstream media and what is going on with UFOs today. It's never been discussed like this in public before. You said it's a virtual parking lot of craft up in the upper atmosphere. Is the disclosure that is happening right now with the military through the mainstream media, Is it because they know that something is about to break? Are they trying to get out in front of this story? Is that what is happening?
Honestly, I haven't really poked around on the human military side of things. I mean, I haven't even thought to remote you over there, except for this one time that I was looking for something. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, because I think I started seeing all these ships around probably a year and a half ago. And, you know, I've seen ships from far away before in the astral, but I've never seen so many just above here in California. I haven't been all around the planet to see floating over everywhere, but there's so many here. And I've heard rumors that there's ships near the sun, and I've seen a few. I've gone that far. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the reason, honestly, because, you know, there are technologies to pick up the energy signature that a space-traveling ship would give off, even if it's sitting in between dimensions or in a bubble of space-time. There are methods for that. I wouldn't be surprised if the military has such a technology at this point, because, you know, what was so interesting about the recent stories that the government came out with was that in one of the stories they were testing a radar that could pick up something that wasn't visible. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were picking them up right now. The only thing I would be surprised about is if they weren't planning to do anything about it.
Okay, there's two things that are happening. Well, there's many things that are happening, but there's two things that are going on right now. We have SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and scanning the Milky Way and star systems for radio signals. There's that, and communication. And then there are the discovery of exoplanets every single day, where we thought at one point, just 20 years ago, that planets were rare. And today we understand that if you see a star, there's a planet, at least one. So now we're looking at, maybe 1 trillion planets in our own Milky Way. And so we're out there reaching and looking for alien life. That is what we are doing right now. Is there signals that can be detected by SETI? And have they detected signals from SETI?
Well, I can tell you there was something I was looking up just here on the internet. Apparently there was 2 times where they actually detected a signal that was consistent enough for them to say, yeah, this is intelligent alien life. But apparently that never got out. Apparently they shut that down, even though people came out about it years later, talking about, yeah, that was totally a thing. Another thing to mention is there was one time that I heard about that this, I'm not sure if it was a computer programmer, but I heard there was this guy that was pretty tech savvy, and he made a specific code that he shot into space that basically when you decode it, it looks like a picture with information and a sort of small drawing of what humans look like and what our DNA looks like. And another aspect to that is that little message that he sent out got a response. There was a return on that frequency where some beings were describing themselves in the same coded language in the same format. Honestly, I'm surprised that this never hit mainstream, because that was contact right there, straight up. And when the other thing that blows my mind is that people say that contact hasn't happened yet. People say disclosure isn't here, but it's like the aliens are kind of getting more audacious every day. What do people think Oumuamua was? That asteroid that came through, what was it?
Last year. Last year.
They're all like, oh, yeah, it was a really strange asteroid. Are you kidding me? Honestly, you weren't even there. You can't even confirm if it's an asteroid or not. And it changed direction in a way that you can't explain. There's being objective, and then there's obviously looking the other way for some reason.
Well,
and I've been seeing a lot of the second one.
Well, let's get into the science and the physics side of this. How does the interstellar travel even happen? Because we're talking about such vast distances. Yeah. How does this happen? Is it faster than light?
Well, faster than light is a way to describe it, but at the same time, from what the Greys have explained to me about their specific propulsion, they wouldn't call it moving at all. Because what their basically ship propulsion does is it bends space around the craft until it makes a specific kind of bubble. So basically what this bubble does is, like, let's say that the ship is heading straight for, like, this giant asteroid. And, you know, it's going to smack into it. But because it has a specific distorted bubble of space, what happens instead is, like, it just slides around any obstacle without actually touching it. It just turns it into this, like, frictionless bubble, I guess. The way that you see things sort of slide off on hydrophobic surfaces, like that's a pretty accurate representation of what advanced space travel looks like three-dimensionally.
And how,
so
well,
go ahead.
Well, how fast are we talking?
Well, the thing is that they fold space around the ship to stop things from hitting the ship. Then they fold space behind the ship to shove the ship forward. So it basically moves as fast as much space they distort behind them. So, you know, it could take the same amount of time to go from, like, Earth to the sun as it could, like, let's see, what's a farther away thing? From, like, Earth to Sirius. And that's just because, like, all they do is bunch up more space around them, and they slide exactly as quickly either way.
I'm trying to understand. So, are you saying it's instant?
Near instant, yeah.
So traveling from here to Sirius, or even closer, you know, Alpha Centauri. Sirius is much farther away. Alpha Centauri is 4.5 light years away. So you're saying to travel from our solar system here to Alpha Centauri, or, you know, Proxima A or B, would be nearly instant? I mean, how much time passes?
And see, that's the other thing. All the ships, they have to be equipped with a very specific timekeeping device. Because if they're not, they can overshoot or undershoot in time. So they'll end up before they left, or they'll end up years after they were supposed to be there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, if you're traveling instantly, it would have to be that way. That's okay. That's interesting.
What happens is that on different planets with advanced civilizations, they have really specific clocks that they keep on their planet's surface and around their planet. And that's so they have a coordinate in time to go and come back from. And ETs keep one around here, but they use a specific calculation method of basically calculating what that clock would say if there was one on Earth. They use a specific method where they measure how quickly Earth orbits around the sun with, I think they use pulsars. So they use how quickly the Earth goes around the sun and specific nearby pulsars and the rate of that to basically detect how fast time changes around Earth. And then from there, they extrapolate what would be the origin point of time around Earth, and then calculate from there what their spot would be at. So it's more complicated than
Eric Stitt just posted, so ET is faster than space, not faster than time.
Well, that's the thing. ETs have a form of space travel. When you go to the seriously advanced civilizations, because I would say Greys are pretty advanced compared to humans. But Greys are also dying because they use that advanced technology in a really stupid way. So if you go to a civilization that's far older than the Greys, that has a much longer history and that hasn't fucked up royally in some way, messed up, because you can do that a lot with advanced technology. What you end up with is a race that basically understands time and space so well and manipulates both so well that they start becoming aware of other aspects of the universe because their brains start developing to basically perceive other aspects of the universe. So a lot of civilizations that are advanced, they have a form of time travel, but that's a pretty serious business, even in space. Like, you don't mess around with time travel.
How much, man, I don't want to get off the time travel conversation, but how much life is in the Milky Way? If we're talking, 100 billion rocky, Earth-like, beautiful blue planets out there, how much life is in the Milky Way? I'm not talking about the universe. I'm just specifically talking about our Milky Way. How much life is out there?
Well, from what I've heard from the Greys and other ETs, usually every single star that has a planet has a form of life there. Primitive or not, but some kind of form. So when we're talking about like advanced civilizations, from what I've heard, the rate of advanced civilizations to life-sustaining planets, it's something like the ratio that they gave me is it's something like 4/8 of all life have reached a point where they're considered intelligent life, and 2 of those 4/8 are really old life, and then 2 of those 4/8 are like newer life, like you would put humans in that category. And then there's a 5/8 that's almost intelligent life. I would say you could call that something like parrots or monkeys or whatever. And then the last 3/8 are some forms of more primitive life.
So we're talking about whatever movement you're doing there, Deet, you need to stop. It's really loud. Okay, so we're talking 50 million, 100 million different civilizations that are doing interstellar space travel?
Pretty much.
How many are visiting Earth?
Well, that's the thing. Earth to a faraway civilization is kind of like sort of like the front page on a newspaper, like, whoa, new planet found with life, intelligent life. But at the same time, not every civilization really cares that there's a new planet with new life. I would say I've heard that it's mostly the local civilizations that are sort of checking Earth out, either to help or to document or to look for something that they could maybe take for themselves. Let's see.
Well, to that end, obviously we're being visited now. I've seen enough and witnessed enough to come to that conclusion. But is there something of interest here on Earth? Is there something rare, or is it gold? Is it diamonds? Is it water? Is it oxygen? Is there something rare here that makes us different, or are you suggesting that we're not that unique?
That's the thing. Like, there's this misconception that a planet has to be Earth-like to sustain life, but there's many, many planets that aren't Earth-like that sustain very intelligent life. So to some places, humans are extremely unique, or there's something about the planet that is extremely valuable, or, extremely interesting and worth documenting. But for other places, it's so similar that there isn't really this huge, oh, wow, interesting, look. Like, one example would be that, like, mind rays, right? They have used telepathy so much throughout their history that they don't have vocal cords they can use anymore. So if they came to Earth and they weren't looking to take anything, one thing that they might find amazing about humanity is music, because we use something we biologically have to create an art form that they don't have at all. So music for them is something they can never really achieve. It's something that this alien species basically creates all the time that Greys would have never known about without seeing humans. And similarly, I would say that I've heard that about a third of all the ET races that come to Earth are looking for something that either they don't have on their planet or they want more of. But at the same time, it really depends on where they're coming from. Because there's ETs that come here that do find something unique about humans, but they came specifically to help with the human condition in some way. They're not really here to take. They're more like here to help.
Where does, when you say I've heard, where are you getting the information from? Oh,
well, there's been several times where I've gone into the astral just to hang out or just to try speaking with specific beings, because I I ended up hearing a lot. Some of it was on the internet, and some of it was from other people. It's like, oh, if you focus on a specific frequency, there's these beings that show up and they'll talk to you. And I was super curious about it. I was like, oh, I want to see this work. And it totally worked. And I've met a lot of beings this way. Sometimes I'll just be doing my own thing, and I'd sort of look around psychically, and I see these beings watching, just random beings. I'm like, whoa, what do you want? I'm just doing my normal human daily stuff. And they're like, we just really wanted to see you in person because, a lot of people have been talking about this human-alien hybrid that's floating around talking to ETs, and we think that's pretty cool. And I'm like, okay.
Are they okay? Do they know you're on this show right now?
I would say some of them definitely know, especially the ones that like watching what I do more often than others. It's kind of funny. They do know in a way that it's intrusive, but at the same time, they mean so well that they know I won't take it badly.
Are they so they're okay with you talking about these subjects? And I don't mean in a negative way, right? But technically, are you spilling the beans on something that they don't want revealed yet?
Well, there's definitely some ETs that feel that way, where they're like, it's like they tell me something and they're like, "You're not about to tell everyone about that, are you?" And be like, "Why wouldn't I? You're an alien. Of course, I would tell people what an alien is telling me." But the general consensus is that, there's all these beings that have come from other planets basically hanging out around Earth, and they can't even talk to humans. Because if they come down in their astral form, nobody can see them. If they come down in their physical form, they might get in trouble with the Federation, or they might run into another ET species, or the humans might just freak out and get violent. There's a lot of ETs that just want to talk to human beings, just want to get a nice interaction going. There's so many times where I'll be wandering around the astral, and this ET sort of peeks out from their ship because they're nearby, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's a human being." And I'm just like, "Please, just leave me alone. I just want to ask for travel on my own for a bit." And they're like, No, please come talk to us. We really want to speak to humans. We really want to see what it's like. So yeah, some of them, they're just like, "Please don't talk about what we're doing here because we don't want the humans to know." And then others are like, "We just want to know so much more about humans. We just want to see you in your natural state and see you happy and talk to you and show you things." It's really a mixed basket.
How does, and again, we're heading up to a break and we can pick up when we come back. But how does communication happen? You've explained somewhat how these ships are moving around in an interstellar situation, but if a ship is here, how does it communicate to another star system? I would think that would take forever. How does that happen? That's an
interesting point that you bring up, because there's some civilizations that they've basically developed what you can call technology that works to that extent, instantaneous communication. There's other races of ETs that have had such strong psychic abilities that they can just communicate back and forth over that distance, be like telepathically, "Oh yeah, we're at Earth now, we're going to be here for a while," and then send an image of where they are. But for others still, they don't actually have the technology to communicate like that. So what they have to do is they have to go in groups and then send someone to go back and relay the message and then come back periodically. That's one thing that actually sets races apart, because some races end up being more psychically gifted earlier on than others, and some compensate with technology and others aren't advanced enough to do that yet.
So it's almost like a homing pigeon, right? Where they would
pretty much.
Yeah, they would have to actually send a ship, because the communication isn't possible. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. If you're using gravity and you're manipulating space for this instantaneous travel, well, you need a ship to do that. Communication is a different method altogether, and it would be faster to send the ship than it would be some type of signal. Yeah, wow. Okay. That's heavy. I never thought of it that way. Let's take a break. Let's continue. This is getting really, really interesting. Our guest tonight is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, David Icke, right here on Fade to Black. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Follow Deet at Down2ET. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight is Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. I'm looking in Twitter. I see Walter there, and I know it's Walter because he just posted like a 5-year-old picture of my double mochas in the studio. Welcome back there, Walter. How you doing, man? I just got to do a quick shout-out, Deet. Sorry about that. Now... we're going to run out of time, and I've got 8 million questions. So let me actually go here. Do you watch Ancient Aliens?
I watched some of it, but I only watched like season 1 and a bit of season 2.
Okay, but you're familiar with the show and its concept?
Yes.
Okay, I can barely hear you. If you can speak back up into the phone.
Yeah.
I lost you for
I've seen that show.
Okay, you've seen it. It postulates a lot of theories, but of course, the core being that we have been visited for millennia, if not millions of years. Can you comment on that?
I can comment on that. Now, very personally, I recently came to Earth. So I can't give you like firsthand experiences except for the stuff that I've remote viewed. But what I've heard from many of the beings that are in the Federation is that the history of Earth is basically a planet that's been lost and found over and over again.
What does that mean?
It means that there's been times in Earth's past where beings came here and found life here for what it was, either primitive humans or no primitive humans yet. And they were like, this is a pretty nice spot. Let's set up shop for a while. But then, they got what they were looking for and left. And then the same thing happens again. We were like, oh my gosh, look at these little beings here. Why don't we try seeing if we can change them to make them smart? Change them if we can see to make them useful. And they do that for a while. And then they're like, you know what? Not so cool Earth anymore. And they just leave. And it doesn't mean that all the ETs that have ever found Earth have left, but at the same time, a lot of what makes a race stay around the planet at all is the level of advancement. Like, there's just not much any race would get from being around humans if humans are just living in tents and hunting and gathering. Versus if humanity was a spacefaring civilization, there would be trade, there would be commerce, there would be information.
And then there's there's the other side of all of this when it comes to Ancient Aliens and Eric von Daniken and Chariots of the Gods, that certain structures on this planet could not have been built without some type of technical help, advice, science, and knowledge, and also maybe even some direct involvement, helping to move these giant stones and put those into place. Like the pyramids, for instance. Was E.T. involved with anything like that in the distant past?
Well, I've taken a look around there before in the past, and I have seen that. I've seen times, there's been times where ETs specifically show up and build something, but more often than not, what it really is that ETs basically sort of flourish a human population until that human population has a really good understanding of sciences and physics and maths, and humans haven't created all of the tools that they're using in that time period, but they are using those tools and they understand how to, and it's usually a very interesting cohabitation between humans that are kind of primitive, but at the same time intelligent enough and civilized enough to sort of live with this ET race that decides to take up residence there.
Is the ET... okay, go ahead. Finish. Sorry about that.
So usually, there's a lot of these structures, these mysterious structures that are the result of this sort of co-evolution of humans and ETs before the ETs left or changed location.
Are we humans aware that this is ET that we're interacting with, or is ET appearing as, human-like enough that we just think that they're smarter
Most
humans
of the time,
running around?
Humans catch on. Now, what I've seen is that there's been two different kinds of interactions. Sometimes the ETs show up and they literally come down and be like, "We are higher beings, you must obey us." And, in that case, the humans are usually treated as less, or at least as less intelligent, and, usually live as a sort of secondary race to this incoming one. But the other interaction I've seen is that sometimes these beings come down, and what they say to human beings is that you are our brothers and sisters. We are part of your family, and we've come to help. And, most of these races don't bother to appear human-like, although humans tend to have an adverse reaction to something that doesn't look human. What I've seen most of the time is that what these races will do is that they'll bring in another race that looks human-like to sort of get humans to be like, "Oh, wait a second, we can interact with these. These aren't strange animals. These are human-like." But at the same time, they still interact with their very not human appearances.
Is it because it's scary, right? I mean, that we would be intimidated and freaked out about it, or is there another reason?
Well, it's mostly that reason, because it's like, if we're walking through like a hiking trail, right? And we're not making very many noises, and suddenly we see a rabbit, like, dead ahead in the trail. And the rabbit, no, not actually dead, just right in front of us in the trail. And it just looks at us and freezes. And there's this very interesting instinct that apparently all of the life forms here have, where if they see something that's obviously more capable or bigger or more intelligent, one of the instincts is to either run away or freeze. And humans have that instinct as well. That's why many times, even if someone is abducted in a positive way, they usually freak out. Because, like, an ET could walk up to you on the street, but if they didn't look human, you would freeze up. You would kind of freak out. I wouldn't even say it's conditioned. It's a sort of instinct that human beings have. And that doesn't mean that it stops any kind of contact, but first contacts with something that clearly doesn't look human will always sort of be tinged with this sort of fearful instinct.
With technology, I want to, again, try to get as many questions in as I can, where there are many, many, many reports over the years about crashed retrievals of flying saucers or craft. And then the comment is, if ET is, traversing the stars, why is it that they can do that? But as soon as they get here, they crash. There's that. And then there's the other reports and stories about landed craft that are given to us. Can you comment first on the first question about the crashed craft? Are there crashed craft? I mean, does ET arrive here and suddenly doesn't have a license to drive and they crash?
Well, there's different examples of that. Because, see, like, going back to when we were talking about communication through space, right? There's some races that have space travel, but as of yet haven't really evolved to the point where they would be perfect pilots. So there are cases sometimes where it's just that, they have a certain statistic that they always keep where they're going to crash sometimes. And sometimes that's exactly what happens. There's also statistically very rare mechanical failures, although as you get higher and higher on the civilization advancement scale, that becomes exceedingly rare because they just get better and better manufacturing methods. But also, sometimes there is some infighting with ETs. It's pretty rare around Earth right now because, there's this huge occupying force I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been infighting before around Earth. There was infighting around Earth not even too long ago. Like, before a lot of the presidents that got here now, there was infighting occasionally because there was more than one race that was like, you know what, everything on Earth is going to be mine. If any other race shows up, I'm going to scare them off. I'm going to threaten them or crash something of theirs. So that's happened too.
How free are you to ask questions and gather information when you're, when you're with the Greys on their craft?
Well, they don't mind telling me sort of details that it goes like this. Like if I ask them, how does the ship work? They'll give me a sort of simplified explanation. If I'm like, how does the ship really work? They'll give me an in-depth explanation. But if I'm like, give me a schematic in human English for the ship's mechanism, they're going to be like, that's where we draw the line.
And okay, have you asked them about the trading of technology? Have they given the United States government a craft to reproduce?
Well, here's the thing. Right now, the way the Greys make ships, humanity isn't possible of recreating. There's ships that you can recreate. That's what the Greys have told me. But as of yet, you can't exactly make ships the way that they do. Because one of the things about Grey ships is that they're usually completely seamless, except for a few important parts in the ship.
Okay, you're getting quiet. Oh. I need you to speak up.
Sorry.
Okay, you said one thing about the Greys.
Yeah, the thing about Grey ships is that they're usually seamless.
Oh, we lost you. Deet?
Are you there?
Okay, you're back. Okay. The thing is about the Grey ships.
The Grey ships is that usually the entire ship is seamless except for specific parts where they need to interact with the inner mechanisms of the ship. So it means that a large part of the ship is created at the same time, sort of like a waffle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like 3D printing or something.
Exactly. Exactly like that.
Now, what about, do you know who Bob Lazar is?
I've heard of him, yeah.
Okay, Bob Lazar says that he worked at Area 51 in an area called S4, and he saw 9 different craft there that were all different and different sizes, and his job was to backwards engineer the propulsion system on these craft. Do you have any knowledge of that, where he's talking about an element 115?
See, that's interesting that you bring that up, because someone brought that up to me, I guess it was about 2 or 3 months ago, and I got super curious. So I was like, let me actually try to go and see if I can find some of this element 115. And so I remote viewed and looked for some, and I found some. It was in this huge crate underground in this base, like really far down underground in this base, and it was just sitting in this huge vault, just gathering dust. So that element is definitely real, and there's at least some kind of quantity in humanity's hands. I didn't bother to look for any manufacturing method because it looks like it was made on Earth. It wasn't in any alien-looking container. It was just in a very large crate.
And what do the Greys use for an energy source?
Well, the Greys, they don't actually manufacture a fuel of any kind. The way that the Greys do it, and it's a little bit hard to describe because they mostly use pictures to communicate concepts. They don't use a whole lot of words like humans do. But the way that they describe it is that what they do is they create a specific container, a container that overlaps into certain sort of dimensionalities of reality. And so they make this container, they sort of fold certain aspects of reality into this container. Then they make another sort of contraption that sort of goes into the container like a lid. And basically what happens is that they fold in reality into this container, they snap it shut with this specifically created lid, and what happens is the basically pressurized reaction inside of these really specifically made containers generate energy.
They fold Okay. I need you to explain that again. Okay, let's circle back and start over. I almost had it, Deet. I almost had it. Okay, so let's try it again.
Imagine like a goldfish bowl, right, with no water. So imagine taking a really large piece of paper and sort of pushing it into the bowl. Like take the center of the paper, put it over the bowl, and push some of it into the bowl. Like not all of it, just partially down. What they do, like, imagine that there's this lid that goes to the goldfish bowl with a sort of apparatus at the bottom. So there's a lid, an apparatus sticking out of the lid that would go straight into the bowl. So what happens is when they snap shut the lid on the bowl, what happens is that space-time gets compartmentalized inside of the bowl. The paper isn't cut, but it isn't connected either. The paper is in this weird quasi-state where it's in a specific space, but at the same time it's not. So from the outside, the paper doesn't look wrinkled, but you know that it's wrinkled from the inside of the bowl. So what happens is they snap this thing shut, and it basically creates a sort of positive energy feedback loop by distorting this piece of paper. And the feedback, this energy feedback comes out through the apparatus in the lid to the other side of the lid, and that's what they use for a lot of their propulsion mechanisms and power sources.
And what does the I'm grasping this somewhat. What does the paper, or what would be paper, what's representing paper here, what is it? And what I'm getting at is it coming from nowhere, right? Are they creating this? They don't have to go and mine this. They don't have to go and gather this on an asteroid or on Earth, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, they don't need to mine it at all. Some aspects of the bowl are made out of specific elements and specific arrangements, but at the same time, the Greys do have some technologies for manufacturing elements in certain quantities.
So they never run out of energy, is what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Huh. That's very interesting. And and staying on this, since they do have an infinite power source, they're not getting stuck in space somewhere. They don't run out of gas, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The only time they get stuck in space is when somehow the energy generator breaks, because these energy generators are extremely complicated, and the average Grey wouldn't know how to fix it. They just don't.
Okay, now, and staying on this, the other aspect to all of this is the clocks and time.
Oh, yeah.
I need you to help me out. I can do that. Because is time linear?
That's a good question, and I will answer it this way. So imagine that there's like a line on a piece of paper, right? Just a line. And suddenly this line starts moving upward off of the piece of paper. And you start to see lines coming out of this line. And what you realize is that it's actually a cube rising from the surface of the paper that looks like a line. Just imagine that. It's actually a cube. Just imagine that.
I'm doing it now.
What I'm saying about time is that to us, it looks linear, and there's definitely a linear aspect to it. However, time is not only linear.
So how are the coordinates done? In other words, it's not a 3D mapping system of coordinates, right? Depth up and down.
Not too much, no.
It's a time. It would have to be a time.
Yeah. So I'll put it this way. So going back to that paper analogy, right? Like the paper being folded into the bowl. So what you can imagine how racists keep track of time is like, imagine that I take that piece of paper from the bowl and I put it in a sewing machine. And so the sewing machine periodically punches back and forth through the piece of paper as I'm sliding it through. That's kind of how the clocks work that they have in different ships and different civilizations. They basically have a mechanism that regularly marks a certain aspect of time, but also cross-checks it to make sure that it's the specific area they think they're looking at. So time is, it's kind of like, I guess you could describe it for what I've been using. It's like this giant sheet of paper moving through the universe. And so in order to understand where they are in that piece of paper, they punch a hole in it somewhere, write down the specific properties of that hole they punch, because every single place where they punch a hole has a different property. It's not a huge difference, but there's a slight detectable difference. So when they want to know if they're on the right time, if they're not 100 years later where they're supposed to be or 100 years earlier,
right,
they sort of punch a hole in that piece of paper and look at the information in that piece of paper.
So then you are going to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but then you are going to a place in time.
Yes.
Right? Am I understanding this? It's my head's about to explode.
Yes.
So
for this analogy, you can consider physical places just on this piece of paper.
Right. So I understand the line concept, right? If you could see me on the camera right now, you can remote view me and laugh. But, okay, so I see the line coming up. It's going into a cube. The line would go into this spot somewhere in the cube, three-dimensionally in space. And then where it stops, that is a time. And that time would be the place and your destination.
Not exactly.
Okay, help me out here. This is getting good.
Okay. So going back to the stitches analogy. So let's say that I take this piece of paper time and I put in a stitch right at the coordinate of Earth at this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that when I put this stitch through time, the thread I'm using turns yellow. Okay? So then, let's say that I'll go way over to Osetutus, way over past Leo. I'll go straight to that planet. And then I'll punch a hole in time right there. And if I'm punching a hole at the same time that it is on Earth, it'll also turn yellow. The thread, once I punch it through there, will turn yellow. But if I overshot and I go to Osetutus and it's been 100 years on Earth, then that thread will turn a different color. Let's say purple for this example.
I almost had it. I think I get it. And so if you overshot or arrived early, what happens to your physical body?
Your physical body would be fine because for most methods of space travel, because every race kind of makes it a little different sometimes, your body would be fine because the ship distorted space and time. So you basically moved in this isolated bubble all the way to your location. So time starts happening to you again at that location, but space doesn't really mind that you basically skipped a bunch of it. I mean, time doesn't really mind. That's basically how it works. So you would just end up there 100 years younger than you should be if you overshot.
But but physically, are you different? I can understand the time would be a different time.
You're asking about the time of your body.
Yeah.
Technically, yes. So what would happen is that the time localized to your body would become sort of in a rift with the area that you're in. And this is interesting because some races have had that happen where, they ended up in a time that wasn't their own. And their bodies just sort of get seasick for a few days or a few weeks. They have weird memories that are going in and out of their head, and it's kind of like seasickness, but space. That's the best way to put it. I mean, but time. So your body just starts going wait, what? Why is this happening? There's something wrong. And your body won't stop saying that for sometimes it's an hour for some races, and for other races, it can be up to a month, sometimes 3 months. But for other races still, what happens when they sort of, take their time from one place and put it in a completely different time is that their body rejects the time that they're now in. Like, they literally start having, like, some forms of allergic reaction. And they might get their body to calm down and, stop having hives if that's what their body is doing. But their body won't acclimate to the time. Their body will say, this is wrong, something is wrong. And in that case, the only thing you can do about it is take them back to their time, where they'll be extremely sensitive to changes in time space afterwards. Or you have to keep them in a very, very sort of, what's the word? A sort of very, very careful state. Because every time something happens around them, it has a chance of flaring up their allergy to the time they're in.
I want to talk more about this when we come back after the break. And we're going to do some overtime, Deet, so get ready for that. Can you handle some more?
I can handle some more.
All right, let's do it. Let's take a quick break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. I do want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, David Icke right here on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Deet at down2, that's T-O, down2ET. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Headed straight to overtime with our guest tonight, Deet, the down-to-earth extraterrestrial. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And this is what I want to do now, Deet, is I want to go through some just questions that I actually have that may seem funny, maybe, I don't know, just ridiculous, but food. What do the Greys like to eat?
And I've asked them that a lot because I really do like food on this planet, but I also have to ask myself, is there something better? And from what the Greys have told me, they brought a few sort of flora from their planet that they left a long time ago that they still keep on the ship. So for like some fruits and some specific vegetables. But other than that, what they've told me is that they mostly eat a sort of like a perfectly balanced mixture of food that they flavor sort of differently, but it's always the same basic thing. So I guess the equivalent would be like, it's kind of like they eat potatoes every day, but they just change the seasoning they're using. But it's like super nutritious potatoes. Like,
doesn't that get boring? Potato. Doesn't that get boring? But they don't care?
Well, some of them care. Some of them are like, what we should really be doing is learning some human cuisine. But the other thing is that Greys are sort of sensitive bacterially. So there's some things that they could feasibly eat from human beings, but there's other things that if they ate it, they might get like a serious fever just because the bacteria on the food, like normal bacteria for us, would make them super duper sick.
So, they come down. They come down and land in your backyard. They pick you up, and you've got a stack of Domino's boxes, right?
Yeah.
Would that be something that they would be into? I mean, or some In-N-Out burger.
That's the thing. Some of them don't like meat, and some of them do, because what they eat gives them everything they would need for meat without actually giving the taste of meat.
Have they tried a hamburger?
Most of them no, and most of them wouldn't want to. See, there's some forms of food that we have here that the Greys sort of consider to be indecent or sort of gross.
What about ice cream? They like ice cream, though. I know they do. They like Haagen-Dazs.
Well, the thing about ice cream is that humanity is kind of unique in the sense that humans have sort of adapted to drink cow milk. There's not a whole lot of other races that have sort of adapted an animal to eat that specific kind of biological matter from them. So a Grey could try ice cream but they would get serious indigestion because they just don't have any capability of digesting milk.
Kind of like me. Okay. Now, what about...
But I still eat ice cream.
What about... Yeah, right, exactly. What about beds, sleep?
So, yeah, the Greys totally sleep. And sleep is pretty common among forms of life. There's a couple of sort of rare races, because it's pretty uncommon. There's a few races that don't sleep at all, but that's like a handful compared to like a room full of 100 people. But the Greys specifically, they sleep. Oh man, they don't need nearly as much sleep as humans, though. I think on average they need around anywhere from like 4.5 to maybe an hour and a half of sleep.
So they have beds. They have beds. And they have blankets.
That's the thing. Their beds are different. They use blankets very rarely because they temperature control many parts of the ship. So the bedrooms are usually the temperature you would fall asleep at. So they don't really use blankets.
Interesting.
Their beds are of a unique design, whereas we have like mattresses and sheets here. What the Greys have is a sort of material tucked into sort of like a shell-shaped bed? No, like a bed-shaped shell. So it's like this, imagine sort of like a bathtub, right? Just sticking out in a room. And they put this material, and it just sort of fills into the entire space of the bathtub. And there's a little panel that comes with this material. And as they interact with the panel, different parts of this sort of squishy material will form in specific ways or get harder and softer. So it's kind of like a super intelligent mattress. And that's what they use to sleep, but they don't really use sheets.
That's interesting.
They're actually kind of neat freaks.
I have a purple mattress. Kind of reminds me of that. Okay, so music.
Greys don't really listen to music.
They don't. They don't listen to Van Halen.
They know what music is. They've definitely heard some music. And some, the more experimental ones, they do listen to it. But Greys, they don't use their ears a whole lot. They can still hear things pretty well, but a lot of what they listen for is telepathic. So they listen to a lot of what you could call telepathic music. That's how they hear most music from human beings. They hear the telepathic songs. But they don't like as much listening to songs through the air because for them, sometimes it can be really grating on their comparatively underdeveloped ears.
Art. You said that they were very visual.
Oh, yeah, they are very visual.
So
now,
are
the Greys themselves don't have a huge appreciation for art, but at the same time, they're incredibly gifted at creating it. They think so much visually that they have ways of communicating like ridiculous amounts of information just within a picture. Just one that they've drawn.
Do they have, artwork hanging on the walls?
Not typically. What's interesting about Greys is that what they like to do with art is they like to accumulate things that they find beautiful and keep them in like one specific place, usually like 1 or 2 rooms on a ship. And they sort of do that because they find that appreciating art should be its own activity. So when you go through most of the things that you do in a day, for them, they don't think about art at all. But then at the end of the day, they might be like, okay, now I'm going to go and appreciate the art that I love. And they would walk into that room and either like look over the paintings, if there's paintings, or listen to the music that they like, or maybe even draw. Although it's pretty rare for them to create art on their own. They can, but they don't feel too motivated to do that. But I guess they're kind of shy about sharing their art too.
So it sounds like the Greys have free will.
Oh, yeah, they do.
They understand the concept of free will.
They completely do, yeah.
The other side of it is I want to go back to your planet and talk about that for a second. We blew past all of that at the beginning of the show. So let's go back. Yeah. What was the name of the planet? Your planet?
Osetutus. Yeah.
Spell it.
That's Osetutus.
Osetutus.
Yes.
How do you say
That's
it? How do you say it?
Osetutus.
Osetutus. Osetutus.
Yeah.
Got it. Osetutus. And describe the. Now, you said to me before, and if I'm wrong, this was a few months ago, that you have been back and you have visited. Was that physical, like you jumped on a ship and went, or did you do this remote viewing?
Astral.
It was astral. Okay. All right. Tell me about your planet.
Okay. So, first of all, it's extremely adorable. We don't really have an ocean like Earth does. We do have bodies of water, and it rains a lot, but we just don't have an ocean the way that humans do. What we have instead is we have a very huge cloud layer above the planet. It's pretty thick, it's pretty big, and for most anywhere on the planet, you would normally see clouds. It's not typically a sunny day there. That's partially because our planet is so close to our little blue dwarf star. Because what would happen if it was a sunny day is that basically the surface of the planet would start drying up at an alarming rate. And a big part of the flora and fauna on our planet relies on a certain humidity level. So if that humidity level starts to disappear, things do start dying. So sunny days aren't like rays of death, but they are a little bit alarming. We usually stay inside if it's like sun high and the sun is out, which is really rare. But normally it's cloudy, but we see the sunlight really well through the clouds. It comes through a lot. It's just not nearly as hot by the time it comes out the other side of the clouds. And the clouds are usually around a pinkish white color, honestly, which is really different from Earth, but that's how it is over there.
Now, you've described, a blue dwarf star. Do you know where this blue dwarf star is? I mean, could you tell somebody at an observatory where this blue dwarf star is, where somebody could go and find it and look at it?
I have a pretty clear mental image of where it is in relation to other stars nearby, but I tried looking for a star map that went specifically into the direction of where that star is, and unfortunately it doesn't look like anyone has looked that far in that direction, because it's not like 1 star back or 2 star back. It's like 4 stars behind this one star that's in the Leo constellation.
How it's in Leo?
Yeah, it's in the direction of Leo.
It's in the direction of Leo, and is it farther than Leo? How many light years are we talking here?
To be honest, I haven't really seen what the size of a light year is from like an astral point of view, although I know it's the distance between the sun and the earth.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I totally get that. But it's in the direction, it's beyond the Leo constellation is what you're saying.
Yep.
Very interesting. What about humor on your planet?
Humor?
Do you have comedians?
Oh, yeah, we do. Like, over on Osetutus, we have many, many human-like traits. So we have humor, we have emotion, we mess around a lot. We get to be a little more serious, but that's because our society structure sort of leans on making us more serious beings. But we do understand comedy, and we do have comedians there. But we do have on Osetutus as well, as we have a lot of art over there. Because in our society, we basically give comparably a free wage to people who want to be artists. So we have an abundance of artists on our planet.
And I've got so many questions. I'm looking at the clock. It's impossible to get them all out. Structure for education and learning, is it similar to here on Earth?
Completely different.
How so?
Completely different. Okay, so what happens is that, let's say that you were born on the planet, Jimmy. So you're like living with your parents in this big communal home, because that's how we do it over there. When you want to have kids and you're a couple, you go and live in this huge home with other couples and other kids, because that way you have a social experience as a child. But when you're like, let's say you're like 3 years old and you're starting to talk, right? What happens is that these 3 people are assigned to you. And these 3 people are basically going to work with you for like 5 to 7 years to figure out what career you would probably work towards as an adult. So these people talk to you, they see your feedback, they show you different careers, they show you different aspects. They find out about you, and they find out about what you like in the world around you. So around when you're like 5 or 6, they start sending you to school. And school is basically classes that you pick. So you would walk into the school building, one of these 3 people would be with you, and the person would be like, okay, let's say that you're like really, really into like radio broadcast. You're probably going to take a class on the technicalities of running like a business that relates to radio broadcast. So it would send you straight into there. And if there's information in there that you don't understand, you would be taking a class before that class to understand that information. But they would only put you in classes that help you learn towards what you're thinking about doing as a job. There's some basic things they teach everyone, but it's a lot less than here on Earth. So let's say that you're like now a young teenager and you completely change your mind. You're like, you know what? I want to be a spaceship engineer. Like that's my goal in life, and everything else has been a lie. At that point, around 2 of the people that were working with you get swapped out for other people who are more experienced in helping, young teenagers. And they're like, okay, so you want to be that instead. So they give you completely different classes. And you just walk into them, you start learning, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, this 3rd person that was working with you starts taking you to the sites of the job that you were thinking about doing. He starts taking you there, showing you, letting you watch the people as they're working, showing you the dynamics, showing you what the stress level will be for the job. So then let's say you're like an older teenager now. And you're like, you know what? I've learned a lot about this whole engineering thing. I really want to do it. So at that point, they would just send you straight to the sort of engineering apprenticeship classes. And this would usually be in its own building, because as you get older, all of the industries, compartmentalize into their own teaching methods. So they send you straight to the engineering building. So the engineering building takes you in, and they're like, okay, now we're going to teach you every single thing you need to be an engineer. And if you want to be a specific one, we're going to put you in those classes instead. So that's what you go through. And as you're learning around, depends, some people start earlier than others at their job of choice. But if you were an engineer, you'd probably start around 30 in OC2 person years. As that being around your 30s, you would start working as an engineer.
Now,
what? That point,
okay. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Okay, so at that point, you would probably be living on your own, because around comparatively 18, 19, 20, 21, you move up from your parents' place and you get your own place. And the interesting thing about our society is that as soon as you become an adult, you get money. You just get a living wage. So if you want to start working as soon as you're out of your parents' place, you can do that, but you don't have to. You can just keep studying till the end of time if you really want to. Although your career people will kind of be on your ass about it, because they're like, it's been 40 years, pick a job and do it.
And I want to talk politics and religion too as well. But
okay.
If you are going through these processes, and is there ego? Is there ego involved?
Oh,
is there competition?
That's the thing. Competition, we're very careful about competition in our society now. Because when we first put in the model of society that we use right now, competition was fierce. Everyone had living wages, so even if you didn't get the job, you were fine. The competition was so fierce. The pressure was on. And what happened is that we started getting a lot of people overworking and dying. Straight up, they just died from overwork. And it was because they just wanted to be the best at their job over everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So at the point where I was living in that society, the one thing that was revolutionary that we were doing is that we were giving people breaks. We were like, you can't work more than part-time hours at your job of choice, because you have a life and you need to live it. Because it was pretty bad. We had these super, super advanced, cutting edge in their field, super experienced because you just get these skill levels as you keep working your job. You learn more and more and more, and you go up on this like expertise level. We had so many like super valuable people to our society dying of overwork, and it's not like we were telling them to work more. They just wanted to work more because they wanted to help more. Because in that society, one of the best gratifications you can get is thinking that you contributed significantly to your society's prosperity. That's really something that we, in a way, kind of get off on. It's just like, you know what? I changed lives today. I significantly, contributed to our society's well-being, and my effort will always be super important because that, like, I've made a permanent difference, and that will never change.
Now, what about...
we have to change our mentality a little bit because that was a little bit unhealthy.
I've got time for maybe two more questions before we have to say goodnight. The next question is religion.
We do.
Is there...
We have a few variations, but our main religion that we had for a long time was that we worshiped the clouds and the sun.
You worship the
clouds and the sun
as deities.
Oh, kind of, yeah. We worship them kind of like parents. So we'd be like, the clouds are our mother and the sun is our father, and we must always respect them.
Okay, that was then. What is now?
So now we have this idea of reincarnation and oneness and this great, strong sort of interconnectedness of the universe. What's really changed is that we've realized what we were deifying is just another element of our universe, and that there's nothing truly deity in the universe, just different levels of advancement and different levels of understanding.
Very interesting. So reincarnation, well, before I say reincarnation is real, but it is real on your planet, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. It totally is. Like, when I was nearing the end of my lifetime there, a lot of people were like, do you know what you want to do next? Are we going to see you again? Are you going to stay here? Because they knew, like,
wow.
In reincarnation, you choose to be a new thing, and sometimes that means leaving your planet.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. The other question that I have is there a government? Is there a structure? Are there politicians? Is there politics? Is there a leader?
Well,
is it democracy? What is it?
Well, it's hard to describe because it's very different from here. But we have basically a governing body in three parts. We have two councils and one sort of emergency task force team. And the reason I say this is because we have a council that basically represents the young generation for our civilization, and another council that represents the old generation for our civilization. And it's how we change the rules based on, you know, is it good for the children just because we think it is, or is it not good for the children? What do the Children's Council say that the children are saying? And then the task force group, that's the group that's pretty much in charge if someone ever declared a war on us. Like if there's an emergency, the task force group takes over. And the task force group, the way that we pick people for the task force group is basically on achievement, although in a way, you could say they're politicians because they do self-advertise, obviously. But we have a lot less problems with corruption, or at least sort of useless corruption. Because, you know, everyone does know each other in these governing bodies. But at the same time, what we care about a lot is results. So if we put someone in the task force and an emergency happens, and that emergency is a disaster when we know that it could have been prevented, that guy's career is basically over.
Is the planet divided up into different cultures like Earth, or is it just one culture on Osetutus?
Well, there's a handful of regional cultures. We weren't quite nations the way humans were, but around our first contact, we were more like nearby kingdoms, I guess, although we didn't have monarchies, just in the sense that we knew that, you know, there was another sort of kingdom over there, but we didn't care too much.
Well, okay. So is there racism? Is there cultural divides? Right.
Like, you could say that technically it almost happened because, you know, there is this sort of trend that can happen where it's like, we're better than them. they're less than us because we do cool things and we're cool.
And
but when our contact first started coming around, like, that completely blew any stupid mentality we had out of the water.
Sure, of course it would. One last question. Here we have the entertainment industry. We have movies and music and television, the internet, and so many theme parks, amusement, whatever, and surfing, sports, skateboard, entertainment.
Yeah.
Do you guys have the same things going on there? Like, do you have television? Do you have TV series?
Well, we have a comparative form of television, but in a way, our entertainment industry is kind of underdeveloped. Because for us, we know that we should be, like, giving ourselves entertainment, giving ourselves, like, rest time, relaxation time, letting off the steam time. But, in the same breath, it's hard for anyone on that planet to, like, seriously consider a career in entertainment. Like, we do have comedians, but, like, creating art forms specifically for downtime for other people, that's still kind of a new concept. Like, we have books and novels, and I'm sure that we have something we can compare to TV dramas, but we have a lot less of that there. And it's kind of not as developed as here. We have the same intelligence, so you see some of the same themes, but we haven't explored it nearly as much as humans have.
Fascinating conversation tonight, Deet. Fascinating. I look forward to having you back on the show. I've got a zillion questions, and I can't believe that we just did 2.5 straight hours. And
it really doesn't feel like that.
Well, and you know what's funny? What did I tell you? What did I tell you? Did you have fun? Did you have fun?
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
You were right.
All right. I look forward to having you back on the show. You're going to be facing a lot of questions in Twitter over the next week, and I can only imagine. So have a good time with that. And then
I'm glad for the questions, though.
And we'll bring you back as soon as we can, and we'll pick up where we left off. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Thank you so much, Deet. Enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, Jimmy. See you later.
Yeah, thank you. What a great conversation. Now, it's very simple. You can follow Deet on Twitter at Down2ET. That's Down, T-O-E-T. We've got all the links up right there on Twitter. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I tried to get to everybody's questions tonight. So much has been left on the table, but we'll have Deet back as soon as we can. And if you have questions for Deet, you can certainly reach out to her right there on Twitter. With that, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody and remind once again, tomorrow night right here, Mr. David Icke right here on Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast only copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want everybody to be safe. Go back, Lee Tepe.